Good morning, everyone. We're going to call this meeting number 24 of the Standing Committee on Canadian Heritage to order. And today we have the pleasure of hosting the Minister of Canadian Heritage and Official Languages, the Honourable Shelley Glover, to our committee. Welcome, Minister. We're going to have you speak for 10 minutes, and then to continue the rest of the hour, we will have questions for you. Following that, we will have a half hour with the officials from the Department of Canadian Heritage, and after that half hour, we will go in camera to work on our study. So, Minister, welcome. You have the floor for 10 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Merci bien. Et pour commencer.
Thank you very much. To start, I'd like to say, go Habs go. We're very happy about last night, and we're all very proud. I also wanted to say hi to my husband, Bruce. It's a birthday today. To start, Mr. Chair, I'm thrilled to be with you today as the Minister responsible for Canadian Heritage. With me today are Colleen Swords, the Deputy Minister of Canadian Heritage, and Robert Herzog, the Department's Chief Financial Officer. I'd like to begin with a heartfelt thanks to the committee members for your ongoing work to help strengthen the arts, culture, and heritage in Canada. You've been hard at work since I was here last fall with your studies on the 2014 Olympic and Paralympic Winter Games in Sochi and on Canada's music industry. I know my departmental officials briefed you as part of your study on the music industry. So you've asked me to come here today to speak about the 2014-15 main estimates for the Department of Canadian Heritage and portfolio organizations, So I will briefly go over the key elements of this with you. The total resources for the Department of Canadian Heritage for 2014-2015 are $1.39 billion. In other words, $178.3 million in operating expenditures, $1,187.7 million in grants and contributions, and $24 million in statutory. This year's departmental estimates have increased by $72.8 million compared to 2013-2014. The overall figure of $1.39 billion for the department includes the transfer of $14.2 million from the National Capital Commission to the Department for the Capital Experience Program. With the transfer of the Capital Experience Program, Canadian Heritage has taken responsibility for activities including the Christmas lights across Canada and Winterlude. I was pleased to participate in both events, and they were a huge success. This year, portfolio organizations are receiving $1.8 billion in appropriations, as well as the $803.7 million they generate as revenues, making total resources of $2.6 billion available to them in 2014-2015. In particular, the National Battlefields Commission is receiving an additional $5.6 million in funding in 2014-2015, so that Gilmore Hill can remain open 12 months of the year. This represents an increase of 64.8%. Overall, the government is providing $8.2 million to this project from 2013-2014 to 2015-2016. All in all, the funds allocated through this year's main estimates will allow the department and the portfolio organizations to continue serving Canadians by promoting our official languages, supporting our arts, culture, and heritage sectors, and fostering sports participation in this country. As you know, the government also tabled the 2014 Economic Action Plan in February, and several items reflect our strong support for arts, culture, heritage, and sports. We recognize the contribution these sectors make to strengthening communities and generating economic activity. According to the most recent figures, arts, culture, and heritage in this country generate close to $50 billion and 630,000 jobs each year.
We've put in place permanent funding to programs that were due to sunset on March 31st, 2015, which brings total permanent funding to $24.6 million per year for the Canada Music Fund and $39.1 million for the Canada Book Fund. We also made $79.9 million in funding for arts programs permanent, bringing total funding for core arts programs of Canadian heritage to $120.6 million on an ongoing basis. The Economic Action Plan also confirmed the permanent renewal of $25 million for the Canada Council for the Arts, resulting in total ongoing funding of over $180 million annually. Now, the combination of our artists' talent and creativity and the support they receive from Canadians has resulted in a remarkable year for the sector. At home, the Governor-General's Awards in Visual and Media Arts recognized 8 Canadian artists in different fields, such as visual arts, architecture, video, independent film, and new media. I was also so pleased to host the screening of Louise Archambault's Gabrielle at February's movie night. This gem of a film won a Canadian Screen Award for Best Picture and Best Actress for Gabrielle Marion-Rivard's incredible performance. Gabrielle also won 5 Jutras, and Antoine Bertrand won a Jutra for Best Actor for Louis Cyr, L'homme le plus fort au monde. My hometown of Winnipeg put on an outstanding show for Canada in hosting this year's Juno Awards ceremony as well. It was a great opportunity to recognize a host of Canadian music professionals for their work: singers, songwriters, composers, musicians, and entrepreneurs. Arcade Fire's Reflector won a Juno for Album of the Year and was also certified triple platinum in March of 2014. And Winnipeg's own Bachman-Turner Overdrive was inducted into the Canadian Music Hall of Fame. The talents of Louis, Jean Cormier, and Marie-Mé were recognized at the awards ceremony gala de la Disque. Internationally, our artists and films are being nominated at the biggest international festivals and winning many, many awards. For example, Xavier Dolan, Tom à la Ferme, won the International Federation of Film Critics Best Film Prize at the 2013 Venice Film Festival. Canadians Michael Bublé and Jennifer Gazoy won Grammy Awards. Dany Laferrière became the first Quebecer to be elected at the prestigious Académie Française. And Alice Munro won the Nobel Prize in Literature 2013. This is a first for a Canadian woman author. En plus de l'accent qu'il met.
In addition to the emphasis that we place on promoting Canadian arts and culture, our government continues to celebrate and honor our history. The Economic Action Plan noted several milestones on the road to Canada's 150th birthday in 2017. Historic events this year include the 150th anniversaries of the Charlottetown and Quebec conferences. To date, our Commemorate Canada program has invested approximately $7.4 million in celebrations related to these historic nation-building milestones. As well, our government is asking Canadians how they would like to celebrate our 150th birthday. Individuals can have their say through an online forum at the Canada 150 website. And I hope that all of you will encourage your constituents to submit their ideas on how to mark this important anniversary. I have participated in several roundtables, and I was particularly impressed by the forward-looking views I heard from youth representatives. And similar meetings are taking place throughout the country with a range of participants representing Aboriginal and linguistic minority communities, as well as business, arts, heritage, and cultural sectors. In 2017, communities of all sizes, from coast to coast to coast, will join in the celebrations of our diverse, bilingual, pluralist, and unique Canadian heritage.
Also reconfirmed its commitment to sport participation and sport excellence in this country. Canada's athletes are an enormous source of pride. Witness Sochi, where we placed third in the gold medal count at both the Olympic Games and the Paralympic Games, winning 10 gold medals at the Olympic Games and 7 gold medals at the Paralympic Games. We will build on the momentum generated in Sochi by continuing to invest significantly in sport. There will be ongoing funding of nearly $23 million yearly, made permanent in Budget 2014, towards sport excellence, bringing total ongoing funding for sports support to $146 million. This includes $11 million for Own the Podium, $6 million for summer team sports, $5 million for the Canadian Paralympic Committee, and $1 million a year for Special Olympics Canada. We will provide Special Olympics Canada with an additional $10.8 million over the next 4 years to help provide sport training and competition opportunities for Canadian athletes with intellectual disabilities. Increasing sport and physical activity among Canadians, particularly children and youth, is another priority for our government. We're providing Le Grand Défi Pierre Lavoie with $1 million over 2 years to promote healthy living and physical activity among school children living in Quebec and in French language minority communities. And I see John Weston over there just grinning ear to ear, and I want to thank you for all of your fitness concerns and helping us all to stay active and healthy through fitness. Thank you, John. The 2014 Economic Action Plan reconfirms $500 million over 6 years for the 2015 Pan and Parapan American Games in Toronto. This includes $193.9 million for the Games in 2014-15, which is an increase of $71.6 million from 2013-14. As one of the largest multi-sport events ever held in Canada, the Games will create economic, cultural, and community development opportunities for the greater Golden Horseshoe area and beyond. They will highlight our country's sport excellence and create a sport legacy for all Canadians. In brief, these are the key elements of the main estimates for 2014-15 and the 2014 Economic Action Plan. Both clearly show that our government continues to be committed to supporting arts, culture, and heritage in Canada. I'd now like to turn it over to your chair and answer any questions you might have.
All right, thank you very much, Minister. We're now going to go to the questions, and we're going to start with Mr. Bowen for 7 minutes.
Thank you, Chair, and let me say to the Minister, welcome, and to your colleagues with you. Appreciate the fact that you're giving time to sit with us and hear our issues and concerns, and we can hear from you. We're looking ahead to the 150th anniversary of Canada. Government has some important milestones that will define our history and shape our identity. Our government also takes holding these events very seriously, and they're working hard to ensure that their celebrations will showcase all the best of Canada, and you pointed that out, Minister. We're certainly with you on that. You and your department have been undertaking national consultations with a large number of Canadians to see how they would like to celebrate Canada's 150th. And could you perhaps give us an update on how these consultations are going, and what are you hearing from Canadians from coast to coast to coast?
First of all, let me thank you for that wonderful question. This is going to be a celebration of the greatest country in the world. The 150th of Confederation for Canada will be an event from coast to coast to coast that is celebrated in every locale. We are presently doing these consultations, as you mentioned, and I'd like to share just one little bit of a proposal put forward by a youth from the North. As you know, we've already got a number of celebrations that are planned, and I think of things like the 50th anniversary of the national flag, the 100th anniversary of women's suffrage. Of course, we're in the 100th anniversary of World War I and the 75th anniversary of World War II, the start of those wars. Presently, we're commemorating those events. So we've got a number of events on the road to 2017 that we're already acknowledging, but there's this one youth who said to me at a youth roundtable, he said, you know, my grandmother, she makes quilts. That's part of our tradition. He's an Aboriginal boy from the Northwest Territories, and he said, I think for our 150th, I think that we should get all of our youth across the country to participate in making a square that would tell people what they think of 150 years in our country. And then we should put all of those squares together from coast to coast to coast and make a beautiful quilt that would then hang in one of our national museums. And 50 years later, he says, us kids, we're going to be around still. We should get together again. And then have a next generation do the same with another quilt. And for years and generations to come, people will be able to see how Canada has evolved and how proud we are of everything we have. These are the types of things I'm hearing from Canadians. And this young boy, I'll tell you, he impacted everyone in the room. But aside from that, we're hearing from seniors who want to remember the sacrifices of many of our men and women in uniform, who obviously some gave the ultimate sacrifice so that we could have the freedoms and the democracy and the liberties that we presently enjoy. I'm hearing from official language minority communities across the country that they want to make sure that individuals who ensure that we have both official languages, that they form part of this fabric of our Canadian identity and continue to thrive everywhere, that they are acknowledged. So I just hope that all of you here will endeavor to do a roundtable, do a consultation in your own communities, refer people to the website that's now in place, and give us your ideas. We want to make this a celebration that Canadians organize. They tell us what they want to do. We don't want it to be a celebration where, of course, the Government of Canada is telling others how to celebrate. This is an opportunity for all Canadians to have input.
Right. Well, that's interesting you would mention quilting, because that's definitely a Canadian throwback from years and years and years ago, now coming back into its own. It's interesting to hear that the young people look at it as a kind of a preservative, if you will, for cultural and history. Yeah, very good. How much time we got?
We've got
Sure.
2.5 minutes.
Oh, good. Minister, you mentioned the Juno Awards, and it was a resounding success. Every year it just seems to get better and bigger and excellent. In your opinion, why is the Canadian music so important, and how does it help foster and develop a strong and stable music industry in Canada?
Well, thank you for mentioning
Music. I know you're heavily invested in a study on music at this point, and I wish you all the best in your study. I'm anxious to receive your report when it's all done. First of all, let me tell you that Canadian music is part of our identity. When we enjoy the music that our artists put out, it reflects who we are as Canadians. Our Canadian music is essential in ensuring that we are different from our neighbors across the border. And so when I think of some of the artists at the Junos, I mean, I think of Serena Ryder and how she hosted with tremendous enthusiasm. I think about, of course, Brett Kissel, who was phenomenal. He's an inspiration to so many young people. This is why it's important that through Canadian Heritage that we provide some funding so that these artists can continue to provide Canadians with music that portrays who we are. And so through the budget 2014, we actually made permanent a number of measures, including permanency in the Canada Music Fund. We continue to also provide to Factor and Music Action so that they can decide how to bring new musicians into this wonderful industry. And it does create huge economic benefits for Canada, huge economic benefits. In fact, when I think about all of the money that is put through the industry, there are jobs that go with that money. So for Canadians, it's not only about feeling good or feeling sad through the music that's produced, feeling proud of who we are through the Canadian content, and celebrating those musicians. It's also an economic driver, and they are employed by this industry. So I'm proud to be able to say it's now a permanent feature of our government's plan.
Thanks, Minister.
You've got 10 seconds.
10 seconds.
10 seconds. Can I just say the Junos in Winnipeg were awesome. Thank you to all of you who were there. I know some of you were there.
Okay. Thank you very much. Monsieur Nantel, pour 7 minutes.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Merci.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to all three for being here. Madam Minister, we all have busy schedules, and I'm sure yours is even busier. So thank you for being here. You started by thanking the committee for its in-depth studies. But where I disagree with you is that some of your predecessors have not really looked at our studies. For example, our study on the 150th anniversary of Canada, many of our previous recommendations were ignored. But I have a very urgent question concerning Radio-Canada, CBC. We've been talking about this quite a bit. And I'd like to ask you some quite specific questions. Have you met with the General Director of CBC Radio-Canada before he announced the most latest cuts? How frequently do you meet with Mr. Lacroix and the members of the board? Thank you for your question. Of course, I do meet with Mr. Lacroix from time to time. And when I started as minister, one of my first meetings was with him. And Mr. Lacroix was there with some of his colleagues, and I was there with my assistants. And the meeting was scheduled for an hour and a half, but we actually stayed there for 3.5 hours. Yes, I understand. And I really wanted to know everything that was happening within the department. And certainly with the question of CBC Radio-Canada, I listened to them, and I am very proud that our government recognizes the important role that CBC plays in Canadian society. That is why we provide significant funds to them. Well, I'm happy to hear that. Thank you. Concerning the board, are there guidelines concerning the board's role and mandate? And if so, could you provide them to the committee? What do you mean exactly by guidelines? Eligibility criteria to become a member of the board. Yes, I could send you the information about appointments, of course. As with all appointments, there's a process, a fairly rigorous process, and criteria must be met. So I can send that to the committee. I just wanted to ask you, though, You mentioned something about recommendations for the 150th anniversary that were ignored. I'm not aware of that. I have quite a list of things that I've seen, but... Well, I will send you the report once again by email. It was... In this committee, we spent several months studying the question of the 150th anniversary, and I do have a complaint about that. But I do want to congratulate you again because, as you said, our committee spent a lot of time studying the digital music industry. And I hope that you will have the opportunity to look at the report. And I hope that the report will be unanimous. So I hope that you will be able to familiarize yourself with the report. We've invested a lot of time and money and effort, and we've seen a lot of witnesses, and it would be great for you to look at the report. In the House, you mentioned the diminishing listenership of CBC. And yet, Mr. Lacroix says that the problems are not related to listenership. Do you have figures concerning listenership, and could you provide them to the committee? Well, just to get back to the 150th anniversary, the plan has not yet been set. So I can't say that we've ignored anything. I encourage you to submit ideas. I know you did make a report about it, but we're still in the planning stage. Well, that's sort of the problem, Madam Minister. Many Canadians are wondering how it can be that we're only 3 years away from this anniversary and we haven't done enough planning. Even someone from my riding submitted a consultation report to you. Are we going to end up with something good at the end of the line, or, you know, I feel that maybe this is a less urgent question than the question of CBC, but I do want to say that there have been specific recommendations, in fact, recommendation number 15, that said that there should be an independent organization created to deal with this, rather than having the Department of Heritage conducting the consultations. So that would make it less partisan. However, I do appreciate your concise responses. And I also want to talk to you about CBC Radio-Canada. On April 9th, you said that concerning CBC's mandate of protecting minority language communities, you said that it was important to have programming that Canadians want to watch and listen to. I think that's a little bit insulting for Canadians who live in communities such as the one that you come from, minority communities. Are you saying that the current programming does not interest Canadians? Well, if I can answer all of those questions, because I wasn't able to answer all of them yet, just to be clear, it was not the government's decision. The job cuts at the CBC result from CBC's decisions. And I can even quote what the union said before the budget cuts were made. The leader of the CBC union, Mr. Levasseur, said that these cuts will not be the result of a federal order. Another PR representative for CBC said the problem is the advertising market, which is bad for all media. So Mr. Saint-Hubert and the unions have both given this proof. Well, I'm sorry, but this is a very urgent question. Not that long ago, there was an interview where Hubert Lacroix specifically denounced this situation. And I believe that my colleague, Mr. Stewart, also has a question for you. Mr. Stewart? I can quote this if you would like. I would like to give the floor to my colleague.
So we're all enjoying watching the playoffs on CBC.
Yes.
And I'm just wondering why you killed Hockey Night in Canada.
Wow. You know very
You've
well.
cut funding for CBC, and now
you know
we can't.
very well that the government does not operate CBC. They make their own decisions. This was
But you cut the funding. You've cut the funding for CBC.
I did not cut the funding for Hockey Night in Canada. In fact, Hockey Night in Canada was a situation where entities bid on the rights to host Hockey Night in Canada. And as Hubert Lacroix said himself, it's actually the right thing for Canadians. That's his direct quote. It was the right thing for Canadians.
CBC had
However,
more money.
Here's what
We
Hubert
could be
Lacroix
watching
also said
hockey on CBC.
About the cuts at CBC, which were a decision made as a result of, and here's the quote, a weak advertising market, lower than expected schedule performance in the key 25 to 54-year-old demographic on CBC television, lower than expected ad revenues, and the loss of NHL contract. This is combined to create an important revenue shortfall. That is why
Also cuts from the
CBC
government.
finds itself.
Thank
Government
you,
funding.
Minister. We're going to move to Monsieur Dion pour 7 minutes.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président. Merci, Madame la Ministre.
7 minutes. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Madam Minister, for being with us. I know it's very important to have you here and your colleagues as well. I just want to read a quote to you. Our government has taken clear commitments towards CBC. The Harper Conservative government will maintain or increase funding to Radio-Canada, CBC. It was your predecessor, Mr. Moore, who said this in 2011. On page 318 of the main estimates, you said that CBC Radio-Canada will see their funding reduced by $115 million, leaving $45.5 million to meet the objectives of 2012. When you were questioned on this in the House of Commons concerning the consequences of these cuts, you said there wouldn't be any consequences and that it was up to CBC to make these decisions. But that's very unusual. I mean, obviously, if there are cuts of $115 million, CBC will have to make cuts. So what has changed since Mr. Moore said this in 2011? The recession started in 2008, and in 2011, you said that the budget would be maintained, and yet you have cut the budget. So what's happened? Thank you for the question, Mr. Dion. As I said before, you're talking about a global recession and cuts from 2012. At that time, Hubert Lacroix said clearly that he had to meet the mandate of the CBC. And as he said, since that time, they lost the hockey contract, they have lost viewers in a key demographic, and they have lost ad revenue. And the cuts are not due to a government decision. As I said, we are providing significant sums of money, but you have cut $115 million in addition to the $7 million from the Canada Media Fund. And then there was a decision to cut another $47 million. No, we give them $134 million, and this is based on a partnership with other companies. So you're saying that all of these cuts, which in constant dollars since of 2014, now since 2006, since the Conservatives came to power, there's been a reduction of $227 million, in other words, 18% of their budget. And you're telling Canadians that you have not made any drastic decisions? You are not responsible for these 600 job losses? You have nothing to do with it? And it's not your concern as minister? Is that really what you're claiming? That's not what I said, Mr. Dion. If you would allow me to finish, I would very much like to address your questions. Well, you have responsibility for this. But you're constantly cutting me off every time you ask me a question. Well, Madam Minister, do you have a responsibility for these decisions? As I said, the economy started to come back after the recession, and all departments in the government saw reductions of 10%, except we are the only G7 country not to have cut in official languages, in funding for artists. Other G7 countries cut funding to their artists, but our government did not. We did not make cuts to music. We did not make cuts to sports. As I said, this was done in 2012, and Mr. Lacroix had already warned us, or had already told us that he had enough money to meet the obligations of the mandate. We provide significant sums of money to the CBC. Now the CBC is suffering because of declining ad revenue, the loss of the NHL hockey contract, which was not a government decision, of course. It would be ridiculous to think that that's the case. And also a decline in viewership. So we recognize how important CBC Radio-Canada is, and that is why we are investing significant sums in it. And they will produce programming in English and French in the regions and elsewhere. But the minister's promise has not been held, and you are cutting CBC Radio-Canada. We don't know why the government has changed, has this new opinion. We did not cut. Well, since 2011, there is $115 million less. Nobody can deny that. Since when have I been minister? Well, if you're saying that that's not your problem, but you are saying that this is me, so I am responding directly. You have departmental responsibility. Your government cut $150 million. There were cuts of 10% all across the government. We came out of the global recession in the best position of other G7 countries. All around the world, we are seen as a government that has succeeded well. How can you explain the fact that the program for the 150th anniversary of the new Canadian Museum of History, that 26 out of 30 issues that it will deal with have to do with the military. Of course, we have to honor our military, but 26 out of 30, I mean, that's 87%. Don't you think that's a little bit of an imbalance when we look at Canadian history? Well, museums are always responsible for their own decisions, Mr. Dion. I would like to conclude with one point. When the Liberals were in power, you cut more than $400 million from CBC during your time in government. And that was done to reduce your debt and to reduce costs. So I'm sorry, but in the context of a global recession, we need to take action. We need to protect Canadians' jobs. We reacted properly, and we came out of the recession in good shape. Well, after the recession, CBC's budget was going up under the Liberals. You promised that you wouldn't make cuts, but you cut $150 million despite your promise. That's what's happened. Okay, thank you.
Mr. Weston for 7 minutes.
Merci, Monsieur le Président, et merci.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Minister, for being with us today. I noticed that about a third of your remarks had to do with sports. You mentioned the support for the Sochi Games and also for the Pan Am Games. Before, during, and after the 2010 Games, which were largely held in my riding, we wondered what the legacy of the Games would be. So my first question for you is, what is your vision of the relationship between sports and heritage? Secondly, last week I was with Ms. Laureen Harper, who is the honorary patron of the Trans-Canada Trail. That is not a government organization, but it's a private sector organization. So my second question, what is the relationship between the government and private companies in supporting heritage and sports and helping them flourish? Thirdly, for the 150th anniversary of Canada, what role will sports play in unifying Canadians? Those are a lot of questions, so if I forget any of them, you can remind me. First of all, sport is so important in Canada. This is something that keeps us healthy. It unites us. And, of course, sports are fun. So, as a government, it's important for us to support communities who want to participate in sports. It's important for us to celebrate our athletes, and that is why we make investments in the Olympics and the Pan Am Games and so on. As we go forward, we will see even more events like the Special Olympics, for example. We work closely with them, and that organization is doing great work all across the country. The Défi Pierre Lavoie as well. We work with them to organize events that encourage Canadians to stay healthy. And you supported a great sports champion, Pierre Lavoie. Yes. And this is really a chance for us to be proud and to see the best athletes that we have, like Jennifer Jones, for example, with her curling team. This is not just a sporting event. This is something that brings together all of our communities in Canada, and we are really proud of that. Now, the Deputy Minister would like to share some of those sums with you, so go ahead.
Pan Am Games and the legacy. Obviously, a large part of the $500 million that the Canadian government has promised will be going to the infrastructure. So that infrastructure will live on. We're also providing $65 million for a legacy fund, which will allow the operating costs of some of those buildings to continue for a number of years. And in relation to cultural strategy, you're absolutely right. Culture and sport often go together. And there's an additional $3 million that we'll be providing for a federal cultural strategy to allow the games, the Pan Am Games, to be experienced throughout the country through sort of a torch facility and some cultural activities connected with Pan Am.
Some of us believe Canada should be the fittest nation on earth, and maybe you've heard that before. Do you see some collateral benefits from what you're doing in encouraging sport, not only at the high performance level, but for all Canadians?
Absolutely. I don't know if you know this, but I played soccer for a very long time before becoming a parliamentarian. I spent 14 years coaching soccer in my community, and I'm a referee of soccer as well. And it's really encouraging to see the impacts that the funding has in our communities. I think about a high-level soccer program that's actually running out of Glen Lawn Collegiate in my own riding that the Government of Canada has been happy to participate in. There's a huge link between sport and well-being and health. There's a huge link in the way we feel about ourselves and how we feel about our communities. That's why sport is so important. It really is part of our Canadian identity that unifies us and will be celebrated for many, many generations to come.
And Minister, I would say there's perhaps even economic benefits in terms of the savings and cost for mental health and physical health problems. Would you care to comment on that?
Absolutely. The savings, I mean, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure really applies when we're talking about sport, because to be active and healthy means that you reduce the risks that are associated with things like heart disease and other forms of diseases that impact the healthcare system. Of course, there are also jobs involved in the sporting industry. When I think about our coaches and our physiotherapists and so on and so forth, I mean, sport is a huge economic driver along with protecting us against these ills in the healthcare field, and of course, as I said, unifying the country. So I know you're a champion of sport. I want to thank you again for that. Keep doing what you're doing, because we should be the healthiest country in the world, and with your help, maybe we'll get there.
And Pierre Lavoie encourages how many people? I heard it's a huge number of volunteers and others. So the small amount of money invested becomes of huge impact. So
it is huge.
Long may you run.
Yes, thank you very much. Thanks,
All right.
John.
Thank you very much, Mr. Weston. We're now going to move to Ms. Matheson for 5 minutes.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, and I want to share my time with Monsieur Nantel. So, Minister, I'm going to ask you two questions in two key areas, and if you would, a written response would be appreciated. The first area has to do with APTN. Now, as a minister from Winnipeg, a Métis woman from the Red River Settlement, you, of course, know that APTN is the world's first truly national Aboriginal television broadcaster. They're experiencing some real difficulties. Last year, the Canadian Media Fund cut APTN's English envelope by 55% and the French envelope by 42%. Now, this was a huge financial hit. So the questions that I would like in writing from you, the response to what are you doing to ensure that APTN receives sufficient revenues from the Canadian Media Fund so that they can meet the conditions of their license in the programming genres, as well as languages and the other requirements. Would the government consider increasing the Aboriginal Language Fund to help offset the losses experienced? And would you, Minister, consider the Aboriginal Language Fund be reserved exclusively for APTN? And my second area of concern has to do with library and archives. Now, I've heard from Canadians across the country, and they have expressed concern about Canadian government library closures. Would you be willing to consult with the archivist, CLA, and provide a more thorough description of the process taken to review collections and have a more transparent process for the management of these valuable publicly owned collections? We're not sure where these collections are going and will they be properly preserved, and it's very, very important. And I thank you for those responses, Minister, and I'll turn it over to Monsieur Nantel.
C'est le fun, on vous demande des questions par écrit, des réponses par écrit.
I won't remember if we...
Oh, mais il y a les...
Yes, it's fun to ask you for answers in writing. Well, so if I can just interrupt, those were two very long and complex questions. For APTN, it's very important to answer that, but if you ask me 6 questions and I don't get the chance to answer them all, we won't do it justice. Well, perhaps we can ask the questions to your staff after you've left. Well, when Mr. Dion asked you a question earlier, you said that you are distancing yourself from the decisions that were made. And I think that you were the appropriate person at the time to deal with heritage questions. Now, you come directly from a minority Francophone community in Manitoba. That said, I would hope that the decisions made can be corrected or modified under your leadership, because, of course, you can exercise your judgment over these matters. Earlier, I was talking about the cuts to Radio-Canada, CBC, which concern me, and our committee produced a report on the question. Now, I'm not sure how many weeks we spent on the music industry study. I think probably 3 months. Can I get your commitment that you will maintain the current funding to the Canada Music Fund at current levels? Many people told us how happy they were that the Canada Music Fund was working well, particularly concerning Factor and similar organizations like Musique Action. Can you commit to maintaining that level of funding and of considering the report that we will produce after so many weeks of work? Well, I was not surprised at all. I was surprised that you said that we ignored the report, which is not true. We take all of your reports very seriously. They inspire us and they give us ideas. So I just want to be sure that I was, to be clear, that I did not ignore it. We're simply saying that the 150th anniversary is coming, and it's an important celebration for all Canadians. That's all I wanted to say. I'll just give you another example. Digital Canada. We produced a report in February 2011, and apart from the National Film Board, nobody listened to our recommendations. But I'll give you the floor once again. Well, let me mention LAC. Diversion.
Of LAC. He begins in June, and I would encourage you to speak with this very talented and qualified new appointee. They, of course, determine their own programs, etc. So, for LAC, that's where I would refer you with regards to the first question, and we all know how important Library and Archives is to Canada. Going back to APTN.
Okay, thank you, Minister. We're going to move to Mr. Falk now for 5 minutes. Maybe he'll want to continue that.
Thank you, Chair, and no, I don't want to continue that. Thank you, Minister, for coming here this morning. And I do want to ask you a few questions, but I want to respond a little bit to what I've been hearing about the CBC, and I do want to say that I understand what you're saying, and that I understand that CBC needs to present a business model that is attractive to maintaining its listenership, and also to maintaining advertising that wants to advertise, and they haven't been able to do that. With over $1 billion of annual subsidy on an annual basis, I don't understand why they're not competitive in the marketplace to keep Hockey Night in Canada. I don't understand that, because other networks are, and the other networks seem to be making a copious amount of money. And so why their business model isn't working, but I think it's a management issue that needs to be addressed by CBC. I think we provide very generous funding.
But they are a Crown corporation, so just to be very clear, we believe that CBC plays a very important role, of course, in Canadian society, and that is why we provide them with that over $1 billion worth of funding. And I compare it to some of the communities that really do see the importance being, they're dependent on it, right? In the official language minority communities, in some of our remote communities, our Aboriginal communities, they depend on the CBC. So this is why it's important. They're a public broadcaster, and I have to say the Olympics were amazing, just amazing. And the CBC did a phenomenal job. In fact, other countries were tuning in at a time when their own television broadcasts were not being viewed. So, as I say, they've had some challenges, but we do provide them with significant funds, and they have enough money to provide under their mandate through the Broadcasting Act.
Good, thank you. Yeah, and I certainly do appreciate the programming that CBC provides. Along that line of thinking, I would like to talk a little bit about a commitment that our government made in the speech from the throne, and I'll just repeat it. Our government believes that Canadian families should be able to choose the combination of television channels they want. It will require channels to be unbundled while protecting Canadian jobs. I live in close to your riding. I live in a rural riding in southeastern Manitoba, and just to qualify my comments, I don't have a cable subscription. I have a TV subscription that is commonly referred to as Farmer Vision, which is the free-to-air stuff. And Shaw was kind enough to send me a satellite dish and provide me with the 4 essential channels for my area, which I get. Now that I've been privileged by my constituents to serve in this capacity here in the Government of Canada, I stay in a hotel and I actually have access to cable network TV, and I'm amazed how much I have to surf through the channels when I do actually have time to look at the TV to find a channel with good programming. And the frustration of many Canadians has been that they've got to pay for all these channels that they really don't like, a lot of times channels that they don't want in their homes. And unfortunately, more and more Canadian parents are allowing the television to be the babysitter. And I think that's sad, because there's stuff coming in that they don't want into their homes, and they don't always have the parental control that they need to. So can you give this committee an update on where our government is at in fulfilling this commitment?
Sure. Thank you very much for the question. And we look forward to, obviously, living up to that promise made in the speech from the throne. We know that Canadians want choice, and we are intending to unbundle. The first thing that we did was to ask the CRTC, of course, to look at this issue and to give us some advice, basically, on how we might provide choice in television while maintaining Canadian jobs, amongst other things. And so the CRTC has come back with a clear roadmap for us that will allow us to provide greater choice to Canadians across the country. And I might just touch on a couple of those things that were said or that were in the CRTC's report. They touched on 4 things that they believe ought to be considered. The first is that the basic television that has been provided has grown substantially. They believe we should return to the basics and provide what they call a skinny basic in television. They also talk about pick and pay, which is somewhat like a la carte, which is, of course, choice, where viewers get to choose the channels they want to subscribe to. They also talk about making our own bundles, which I know I live in Gatineau while I'm here working in Ottawa, and Videotron already allows me in Gatineau to pick some of the channels that I want to watch, which is much appreciated. And then, of course, CRTC also touched on the pre-made bundles that are the ones that exist right now. So they saw that these 4 elements really ought to be considered, but they are continuing their discussions, and we will look forward to further instruction and advice from the CRTC. But this is a tremendous move forward for our consumers. This is something they've been asking all of us for some time, and I'm pleased to be part of a government that intends to provide them with that choice.
Good. Thank you, Minister.
All right, thank you very much, Monsieur Nantel, pour 5 minutes.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
5 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I can't help but think that my colleague's question is quite relevant. There's often a variation in the signal, and sometimes the CBC is not available with a new digital TV. So that's an important issue, as my colleague mentioned, in the Gaspé, for example. So CBC has difficult choices to make. And I would just like to say to everyone here who is interested in CBC and Radio-Canada that I really think they should listen to the interview that Hubert Lacroix gave to the show Pas de Midi sans Info. It's very easy to find this interview. CBC has always been a proud user of web platforms, and so it's very easy to find a retransmission of this interview. And Mr. Lacroix says clearly that his mandate is not to ask for more money to perform his mandate better. He says clearly during this show that it is up to parliamentarians to decide how much Canadians will pay for the service. So I understand your position, but it is not true that Mr. Lacroix said that he had enough money to carry out his mandate. He said, I could do much better. And if you look at the current situation, I think it would be useful for him to have a bit more money. So I understand your position in quoting Mr. Lacroix, but you can always quote someone out of context. And if you go listen to that particular interview where he is speaking to someone else, not to me or to you, but he says this clearly to all Canadians. With that, I would like to give the floor to my colleague. I just wanted to say that if you look at all of the departments in the government, there's not a single agency or organization who would say, we have enough money, we don't want any more money. Of course, they're all going to say, we would like more money. But the fact is that we provide significant sums to CBC Radio-Canada, and they have enough money to carry out their mandate as per the law. And Mr. Lacroix himself had said that he had enough money. That's all I'm saying. I'm not saying that he or the other agencies wouldn't like to have more money, but the priority for the taxpayer is jobs, the economy, and economic recovery. I'm sorry, I can't help myself, Ms. Glover. I have to say that those taxpayers are also citizens, and they care about Radio-Canada, CBC. And that's why we are giving them money. Do you know that the money that I mentioned, the $1.1 million, is the same amount that I have in my department for all festivals and celebrations, Canada Day celebrations, it's almost as much money as I have in my department to allocate to all of our communities across the country for those types of celebrations and festivals. So I can tell you this is a significant sum of money, and we recognize the importance of their role, but they have enough money. Well, that's what you say, but we are 15th out of 18 countries in terms of funding for the public broadcaster. I believe only we and the United States and a couple of other countries are lower on the list. So I'll give the floor to Ms. Matheson.
Merci beaucoup. I wanted to come back to...
thank you.
I wanted to come back to the issue of the television, about the access to channels. And I'm mystified because in London, Ontario, there's no free air-to-air reception anymore. Everyone has to pay, and this caused a great deal of consternation. So to say that people have access, I'm not convinced of that. And secondly, I'm wondering if you would be willing to talk about other aspects of heritage. For example, the grants in regard to official languages. It's come to our attention that there's been a significant delay in terms of those grants, and our official languages are a profound and important part of the heritage of this country. So in terms of our access to television and in terms of the delays to organizations in need of those official grants, I wonder, can you respond to that, Minister?
Sure. Thank you for the opportunity to respond to your questions. Just to be very clear, I was answering a question to Mr. Falk about unbundling. And when I said unbundling is something that consumers and Canadians have been asking for some time, it is in fact what the CRTC was also seeing when they did their review. And so our intention through the speech from the throne is to provide them with that choice. And so that's the question that I answered. With regards to the official languages, as you know, I went through school in immersion. I'm so proud to be someone who can speak both official languages, our national languages here in Canada. And I actually learned how to pronounce French words properly by listening to Radio-Canada, which is why I know the importance of Radio-Canada. This is a $1.1 billion commitment. This roadmap to official languages is a historic document that provides funding through a number of ministries so that Canadians can have the opportunities to have both official languages prominent in the things that they do. So in this roadmap, we've divided it into pillars: education, immigration, and communities. Many of them have envelopes of money through different ministries. In my own ministry, I also have funds through my direct ministerial programs that flow to our communities to enable them to provide the important programs that they do. There is a process, though, to get the money out the door. And the process to get the money out the door means that we have to make sure that those proposals actually meet criteria, etc. And it's actually through our Deputy Minister and her hardworking team at Heritage that they make sure that that criteria is satisfied, and then the money flows. We have to ensure value for dollar. We have to ensure that the money meets the envelope criteria. And so we are moving as quickly as possible, and the money is flowing. In fact, just the other day I signed 200 different program proposals to flow the money out to the communities. I can only work as quickly as I can, and I know how hard the Heritage public servants work, and will continue to provide this historic funding because it's important. It's essential.
All right. Thank you very much, Minister. On behalf of the committee, I'd like to thank you for joining us today, and we will briefly suspend while you pack up. Right, we'll call the meeting back to order, and we'll continue with our Deputy Minister, Colleen Swords, and Robert Herzog, Director General. So we'll continue the questioning, and we're going to go now to Mr. Weston for 5 minutes.
Okay. Merci encore, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you again, Mr. Chair. It's nice to have the opportunity to ask you two some questions as well. I was very interested to learn of the emphasis that our government is placing on the Pan Am Games. I noticed that there was an increase for heritage in this budget, and that includes $71 million for the Games. Could you tell us how those funds will be spent? And I don't know if you can answer this question, but will this also provide health advantages for Canadians beyond the Games themselves?
Obviously, anytime we host a major sporting event, there's benefits for our young people who see these wonderful athletes and they are inspired by them. So it has that spillover effect always, I think, for our young athletes. Overall, the government is providing $500 million, and that's spread over a number of years. So there are variations from year to year in what we're funding. And I'm just going to ask our Chief Financial Officer to explain the details of exactly where that $500 million is going and how much it is that relates to this year.
Merci.
Thank you. As noted earlier, there's a total of $500 million that's being provided by the Government of Canada for the Pan Am Games. Of that $500 million, $377.1 million is for sport infrastructure. And so when you see an increase in the budget of $71.6 million, essentially the amount that is being provided for infrastructure is increasing in 2014-15, and the amount will, in 2014-15, be $189.8 million for infrastructure. So in our total main estimates, in our Vote 5, there's $189.8 million for sport, for the Pan Am Games, for infrastructure. In addition, as I believe was earlier mentioned, there's $65 million included in the total $500 million Government of Canada contribution for legacy funding to help support the installations once the games have taken place, and so the facilities can be used on an ongoing basis afterwards to again support athletes and to support community use of those facilities as well. And the Government of Canada, in its $500 million, is also providing $48.9 million for essential support services that will be provided during the games themselves.
We learned after the Olympic Games in Vancouver Whistler that it's very important to have funding afterwards for the maintenance of the infrastructure. If we look at all of the funds that will be invested in the Games, what percentage will be spent by the Heritage Department?
Oh, yeah. If you mean which amount is for our department, Patrimoine Canada, it's $500 million out of our department for the full period. The games themselves, of course, cost more. There is funding being provided by the provincial government, for example, in the City of Toronto, and that doesn't include security costs, I believe, that might be additional.
Okay, merci.
Thank you. And as far as our upcoming 150th anniversary is concerned, could you tell us a little bit more about this? The minister said that this emphasis on sports and heritage would be reflected in the celebrations. Could you tell us exactly how that will happen? What's the relationship between our investments and the anniversary celebrations?
Or all that we might do on the road to 2017 is not finalized yet. There are certain events in the road up to 2017 that we know of, and in 2017 itself, we're still gathering ideas, of which there are very many, for how best one could celebrate. In the road to 2017, though, there are a number of important sports events that Canadians will have an opportunity to experience and watch, and some of them are taking place in their own communities. For example, the under-20 women's soccer World Cup is going on in parts of Canada. I believe it's in 2015? This year? This year. So that's one example of a major sporting event that we'll be able to showcase Canada for the world and for a lot of young people. I think, as with any major celebration, we will be wanting to identify ways in which communities can express their pride and their sense of Canada's history and Canada's future. And clearly, after we've seen in the Olympics, and I hope as we'll see in the Pan Am Games, that pride will be on display once again, and there'll be opportunities for communities to identify projects that tie in with 2017, but that are also related to sport. One of them would be the Trans-Canada Trail. That's very important, I think, for people's sense of how you can keep fit, but at the same time enjoy Canada.
Okay, thank you very much. We're going to move to Monsieur Nantel for 5 minutes.
Oops, thank you. Bonjour, madame.
Thank you. Good morning, and thank you for being here. I have a question for you. I tried to get answers about this, and I don't know if there has been an announcement made or if there's been progress made, but it concerns the absence of Quebec councillors on the CRTC board. It's been about 10 months or maybe a year. Has there been any progress made in the search for candidates to represent Quebec? In all of the debates concerning Radio-Canada or any other cultural organization, it's clear that Quebec television has a crucial role to play. So has there been any progress made on this issue? Well, Mr. Nantel, there has been progress, perhaps not enough to satisfy everyone here.
Somebody for boards is not something that's done in a week. There is a selection process. Interviews did take place late last year. Then reference checks have to be identified. In some cases, I'm not saying in this one, but in some cases you discover that there's a potential conflict. So you have to decide whether you're going to start the process over again or see if there's ways to resolve conflicts. I'm not saying that's the case here. I'm just talking in general terms. So we are very much aware of the need to ensure that the CRTC has its board well staffed, and we are working hard to make sure that that happens.
Bon, je vous remercie. Effectivement.
Well, thank you. The appointment to Library and Archives Canada was good news. We had to wait a long time for it, but I think it did satisfy people in that archiving community. Can we expect a conclusion soon? Many people in the television industry are quite concerned about this, particularly in Quebec. So can we expect a new development soon?
I can say is that we're working hard and we're doing everything we can to get the necessary decision. It is a governor and council appointment, so it's something that involves not just the public service but also the government. We and the government is working hard, and we hope that there will be a decision in due course.
Merci. Je vais céder la parole à mon collègue, Monsieur Stewart.
Thank you, and I'll give the floor to my colleague, Mr. Stewart.
I have some more questions about CBC. And what I'm interested in is we talk about current funding and then past funding, but it's a bit confusing sometimes because it's not adjusted for inflation. So what I'm interested in is long-term funding for the CBC. What percentage over the long term is provided by the government, and what has been brought in as revenue? So say since the 1970s, has the proportion of money that the CBC has received, have they received a larger or smaller of their overall operating budget from the government? And if you can't provide that today, perhaps you could, it should be a fairly simple thing to compile. If you could submit that to us, that would be great.
Thanks for the question. I have the figures for 14-15 for what amount is received from the government, what amount is normally received on own source revenues. I don't have the figures going back.
I'm interested in proportions, though, because it gets really confusing when you don't adjust, for inflation. This government frequently does that.
Well, for 14-15, though, the appropriation from the federal government is over $1 billion.
Right.
And the revenue expected in 14-15 is $670 million. So it's a fair proportion that CBC obtains from own source revenue.
But you wouldn't have the exact proportion.
That's the proportion for 14-15.
Right. Those are the figures, but the percentage that's provided by the government.
I'm not great at math, but
Okay.
$1 billion versus $1 billion out of $1.6 billion.
Okay. And would you say
provided
going
by the
back a
government.
decade, is that a larger or smaller proportion?
That we would have to get back to you on because I don't have the figures here. With respect to inflation, though, I would say that there was money provided to a number of the Crown corporations for inflations related to salary in years past, and we'll get you those figures as well. So there was some adjustments for inflation.
But would it be fair to say that the government provided the lion's share of revenue for CBC in the early years, and now it's relying more on private sector funding in current years?
I don't have those figures in front of me, so we'll have to get back to you with them.
But no guess?
No.
No guess. Mr. Herzog, no? No guess.
No guess.
Okay.
You have 20 seconds, Mr. Stewart.
Okay. No, I won't give it to you. Sorry. So how long is Hockey Night in Canada going to be on CBC?
Well, in addition to the fact that the rights have now been sold, it is important to remember that CBC has arranged a 4-year contract. So they will be continuing for at least for the next 4 years and providing Hockey Canada coverage. So it's not them that's got the rights, but they will be providing the coverage.
Okay, thank you
And
very
the
much.
other question is, how long do we have the Habs in the Stanley Cup final? Because CBC will definitely be providing that. So if they go to the Stanley Cup final, we'll have them even longer.
All right, thank you. We'll move to Mr. Falk for 5 minutes. No,
Mr. Chairman, thank you, witnesses, for coming here today. My question revolves around veterans and war. This past Friday, we just had a National Day of Honor, where we celebrated the conclusion of our mission in Afghanistan. And this year will also mark the 100th anniversary of the First World War, which lasted more than 4 years, and the 75th anniversary of the beginning of the Second World War. In its report on plans and priorities, the Department of Canadian Heritage stated that existing resources, the Department will fund activities that give Canadians opportunities to participate in the commemoration of the two world wars. Can you tell us a little bit about what those existing resources are and how the Department will mark the anniversary of these historic events?
The Department does have various programs that can assist us in commemorating these important events. They include the Commemorate Canada program. So there will be some funding out of there that will be used to commemorate the World Wars. Building Communities through Hearts and Heritage program, which allows individual communities to put on events that are related to matters of importance to Canada. The Museum Assistance Program has provided some funding to help museums include more information on the wars. The Canada Cultural Spaces Fund is available for cultural buildings for the infrastructure that may need help in renovation, and some of the funding from there is being used to help in these commemorations. And then there's the Canada History Fund, where we have various competitions, essays, and so forth, where we're trying to focus on some of the world wars. So that's some of the funding that our department has. Of course, Veterans Affairs and D&D is also involved in commemorating these wars, and they would have additional funds for that.
Okay. Can you tell us a little bit about the amount of funding, the total budget that your department has for these events?
Total budget. Have you got that, Bob?
The funding comes from a series of programs, as Mrs. Swords had mentioned, so it would be a part of the funding from the different programs. So, for example, we mentioned Commemorate Canada. Commemorate Canada has a budget of about $3.25 million, and some portion of that would be provided for commemoration of World War I, World War II projects. Similarly, our Building Communities through Arts and Heritage program has a set budget, and some portion of that funding would be provided for World War I, World War II
Those
commemorations
departments have
projects.
each included that in their detailed budgets, and a portion of it.
Yes, they would be included in their budgets.
Okay. Our Canadian Museum of War here, just down the street a little ways, is that something that falls under your portfolio?
Yes, it does. They're part of the Canadian Museum of History organizationally, but yes, it does fall under our minister's portfolio.
Okay. I had the opportunity to tour that museum last year, and it's very well done. It's very impactful, and we're hoping that in Winnipeg we'll get kind of the same traction from our Canadian Museum of Human Rights.
Which opens in September.
Right.
Yeah.
And do you have an update on that, on how things are going there? And
yes, I visited there about a month or so ago, and it's a spectacular building. They're starting to put in some of the exhibits. I think it will be a very special and informative venue for all Canadians. When you mentioned the War Museum, I'd also say that we just announced, the ministers just announced, I think this week, the Holocaust Monument, which will be situated right across from the War Museum. So there'll be that part of Ottawa will be a true memorial to important events in our history.
I would imagine that our War Museum will also be involved in some of these celebrations, both the 100th year and the 75th anniversary.
Yes, indeed, and in the estimates, the full budget for the Museum of History is in there, and part of that would be for the War Museum.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, how's my time doing?
You have about 45 seconds, Mr. Falk.
Oh, okay, very good. A little bit more about the 150th anniversary celebration in 2017. Apparently, you're starting to get some feedback. Can you give us a little bit of an idea of the flavor of the feedback you're getting? What is it that Canadians are asking to see?
Canadians are, you could almost imagine what they would be saying just by asking people around this room. Canadians are asking for things that involve youth, so that the same sense of excitement that was created in 1967 can be created again, and when those youth are our age, then they too will have that memory. They're asking for events and activities that strengthen our pride, that strengthen our recognition of what we've gone through in 150 years, but sort of foreshadow what might be coming next. There is a lot of interest in the new digital world. How best can you take advantage of that? How do we connect Canadians? How do we unify Canada? And there's a lot of interest in the North. A real sense that the North is a very special part of Canada, and maybe there's opportunities here to identify ways in which we can help celebrate. And people are always anxious to have a big celebration, a real on the Hill and across all across Canada, a very special celebration.
Thank you. We'll go to Monsieur Nantel for 5 minutes.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
5 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, I'd like to ask you a question about those celebrations. As you know, we've talked about the subject a lot in this committee. I think there's been a lot of information about it. And I'm not sure that all of our recommendations were taken into consideration. And that bothers me, because this committee is really doing objective work, and we are trying to do the best work that we can for Canadians. And we consulted tons of people. You mentioned 1967 earlier, and how that was a great event that really marked people at the time. So I would like to ask you a twofold question. First of all, is there already a concrete timeline for organizations or municipalities who would like to bring forward project proposals? And if not, have there been in-depth discussions with the people of the 375th commemoration. So, are there other proposals? And while you're looking for your figures, I would also make the following comment. The 375th anniversary of Montreal in the preparations for that, they tried to find a lot of possible themes, and they really tried to find a good metaphor that would represent the celebrations. So have you had similar discussions, and is there a concrete timeline for when municipalities and provinces can bring forward project proposals?
I did want to assure you that the report of the committee, which was in September 2012, has been read carefully. The government did provide a response. It was tabled back in January 2013. And every time the government tables a response, it means that people have read it, people have developed a response, it's been approved by Cabinet. So the committee shouldn't feel that it was ignored by any means. It is something that we have looked at.
So if I may, Mrs. Swartz, wasn't there clearly a recommendation in this report that a neutral agency committee be formed to help the government in planning these? Wasn't this in the report?
It was in the report. The government has tabled its response. We're still completing consultations with Canadians. There have been a number of organizations who got ideas. This will be one idea that is fed in. We have not reached any final conclusions yet on how we will be moving forward. That will be something for Cabinet to be deciding. On Montreal 375, we have had discussions with them. There have been a couple of meetings with the organizers, and we will continue those discussions, which I hope will be very fruitful.
Vous comprenez que, évidemment,
Now, obviously, I know everyone here is doing their work. And Canadians, as I said to the minister earlier, are not just taxpayers. They're first and foremost citizens. When they pay taxes, they want to benefit from the work that's done by you and me, and they want to feel pride. Honestly, I think it's really the last minute, because if we want to come up with something that people will really remember, we're really going to have to fast-track the project, don't you think?
What would be worth stressing is that we're not just looking at 2017 as 1 year, that, midnight switch goes on and suddenly we start. We're looking at how we ramp up, how we identify important events now that build up to 2017. So that if you look at this year is the anniversary of the Charlottetown and Quebec conferences, which basically led to 1867. We wouldn't have had that without them. There's a tremendous amount of activity going on in PEI to celebrate this year. They're doing a number of events with Quebec. The tall ships will be sailing from PEI up to Quebec. And as the minister mentioned, our department has allocated over $7 million for those activities and events. Other departments have also contributed, as has the provincial government. So I think it's not quite correct to say that nothing is happening. There is a lot going on in the build-up, and we're still finalizing all the planning for 2017 itself.
All right. Thank you very much, and thank you to our officials for joining with us today. Thank you for your answering the questions of our committee members. We will briefly suspend, and we're going to go in camera, so we're going to have to clear the room.